Welcome to these gentle, soothing stories for sleep. My name is Science for Sleep, and it is a quiet honor to be your guide tonight. We are about to embark on a journey together, a long and drifting voyage back through the deepest corridors of time, to listen for the very first whisper of a truly ancient story. The origin of language. This is a lullaby from the dawn of humanity, a tale of how we found our voice in a once silent world. Before we begin to drift away on this current of thought, I would love to know where you are listening from tonight, what small corner of this wide earth you call home. Please feel free to leave a gentle word in the comments below. And if these stories bring you comfort, please consider supporting this space with a like and by subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much. And now, let us begin. Close your eyes. Settle into the quiet comfort of your surroundings and let your mind float free. Our story begins not with a word, nor even a sound, but with the most profound and absolute silence imaginable. We must travel back, far beyond any human memory, beyond the rustle of the first leaves or the sigh of the first ocean wave, back to the very beginning of everything. Let your mind drift into the vast dark theatre of the early universe, just after the moment of creation, some 13.8 billion years ago. Here, in this expanding emptiness, there is a silence so complete, so deep, that it is almost a presence in itself. It is the silence of the void, the hush of infinity. There are no stars yet, only vast, swirling clouds of hydrogen and helium, glowing faintly in the dark. There is no air, no water, no solid ground upon which a sound could be made or upon which it could travel. For sound, you see, is not a thing in itself, but a journey, a vibration, a story that needs a storyteller and a listener. It needs a medium, a substance through which to pass its message. Sound is a physical event, a dance of molecules. Imagine a perfectly still pond, its surface like a sheet of dark glass. A single drop of rain falls, and a ripple expands outward, a circle of energy traveling across the water. The water itself does not travel to the edge of the pond, but the wave, the message, does. In much the same way, a sound wave is a ripple of pressure, a vibration passed from one molecule to the next through a substance, be it air, or water, or stone. But here, in the near-perfect vacuum of early space, the molecules of gas are so far apart, so lost and lonely in the immense darkness, that they cannot touch. They cannot pass the ripple along. A cosmic bell could be struck with all the force of a supernova, and it would make no noise at all. Its vibration would simply be lost, radiating away into the endless, silent expanse, an unheard, unpropagated tremor. This immense, primordial silence was not empty of all energy. However, it was filled with a different kind of echo, a whisper, not for the ears, but for the eyes. Permeating every single cubic centimeter of this nascent universe was a faint, uniform, and incredibly ancient light. We call it the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself. It is not the bright, sharp light of a star, but a gentle, luminous hum, a kind of visual white noise that fills all of creation. Imagine standing in a room whose walls, floor, and ceiling are all heated to a soft, uniform glow. No matter where you look, you see the same gentle light. This is what the universe was like. It was the fading warmth of its own birth, a silent, visual lullaby that has been traveling across space and time ever since, growing cooler and fainter as the universe expands. It is the oldest story we can perceive, a picture of a time before the first star ignited, a testament to an era of profound, luminous quiet. And so, for hundreds of millions of years, this was the state of things. An expanding cosmos filled with silent light, a universe waiting for a stage, waiting for a place where molecules could gather closely enough to learn the dance of sound. Slowly, patiently, gravity began its work. Those vast, thin clouds of gas began to curdle and clump together under their own immense weight. In some places, the clumps grew so dense, so hot, that they burst into thermonuclear flame, and the first stars were born, splashing brilliant, focused light into the darkness for the very first time. And around these new stars, Smaller eddies of dust and gas and ice began to spin and coalesce, forming into rocky spheres and gaseous giants. Planets were being born, and on at least one of these small, rocky worlds, something truly remarkable happened. As the molten planet cooled, gases trapped within its very stone were released, venting from volcanoes and fissures, and this nascent world began to wrap itself in a thin, precious blanket of vapor. It grew an atmosphere. This was the pivotal moment, the turning point in our story of sound. This atmosphere, this ocean of air, was the medium that the universe had been waiting for. It was a substance, a thick and vibrant sea of molecules, now held close to the planet's surface by the gentle but persistent pull of gravity. They were now close enough to touch, to jostle, to pass a message from one to the next. The stage was finally set. The silent, empty theatre of the cosmos now had a small, enclosed concert hall, filled with the very substance that would allow a symphony to be played. And for the first time since the beginning of all things, the physics of sound became possible. All that was needed now was a vibration, a disturbance, a first note to be played in this waiting, gaseous ocean, a first ripple to be sent through this new and vibrant medium, to finally break the long, cosmic silence of a waiting world. And so the stage was set, a vast and waiting theatre of air clinging to a young, restless world, and it did not have to wait for long for the performance to begin. The first sounds on Earth were not the gentle calls of life, but the powerful, percussive voice of the planet itself. This was a world still in the throes of its own creation, a place of immense geological energy, and it spoke with a deep and violent poetry. Imagine the sound of the planet's crust, still thin and unstable, groaning and shifting as continents began their slow, multi-million-year dance. It would have been a deep, earth-shaking rumble, a vibration felt as much in the bones as it was heard in any theoretical ear. And then there were the volcanoes, thousands of them, studding the surface like fiery mountains. They were the planet's great chimneys, breathing smoke and ash into the new sky, and their voice would have been a constant, terrifying chorus. A low, persistent tremor from the magma churning deep within, punctuated by cataclysmic explosions that would send shockwaves tearing through the atmosphere for hundreds of miles, a sound so loud it would be less a noise and more a physical blow. The hiss of molten rock, 1 billion tons of it, pouring across the land or plunging into the nascent oceans, would have been a sound of immense scale, the sound of creation and destruction all at once. This was the Earth's first music, a symphony of fire and stone. Alongside this percussive rhythm of geology, a new sound began to flow, the voice of the atmosphere itself. As the planet spun on its axis, and as its surface was unevenly heated by the young sun, the great ocean of air was set into motion. Wind was born. At first, it would have been a soft sigh over endless plains of volcanic rock, a lonely, mournful sound in a world without obstacles. But as mountains were thrust upwards by tectonic forces, the wind found a new instrument to play. It would have howled through jagged canyons, whispered over sharp ridges, and roared across high plateaus. This was the sound of the air itself, a flowing, ethereal voice that carried with it the dust of deserts and the chill of the poles. And then came the water. As the planet cooled, the water vapor that had been suspended in the hot, dense atmosphere began to condense and fall. The first rain. It may have lasted for centuries. A relentless, planet-wide deluge. Imagine the sound of that first storm, the drumming of trillions of water droplets against bare rock, a sound that grew and grew until it became the roar of rivers carving the first valleys, and finally, the immense, breathing rhythm of the oceans. The crash of waves upon a barren shoreline is a sound we still know today, a deep and steady percussion that speaks of immense and tireless power. It is perhaps the closest we can come to hearing the heartbeat of the ancient earth, a rhythm that has not ceased for 4 billion years. This new world of water was not just another source of sound. It was an entirely new medium for it, an environment with its own unique acoustic properties. Sound travels more than 4 times faster in water than it does in air, and it can travel for immense distances. The ocean became a second concert hall, one even more efficient than the atmosphere above it. A deep, resonant space where vibrations could propagate with stunning clarity across entire ocean basins. A landslide on one continental shelf could be heard, or rather felt, as a deep thrumming vibration thousands of miles away. The dense world of water, cradling the planet, was a perfect conductor for the planet's geological groans and whispers, a liquid bell that transmitted every tremor and every impact with incredible fidelity. The quality of these sounds, however, both in the water and in the air, would have been strangely different from the sounds we know today. The early atmosphere was not our familiar blend of nitrogen and oxygen. It was a thick, soupy mixture of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, methane, and water vapor, far denser than our modern air. This density would have acted as a kind of cosmic mute. Sounds would not have traveled as far, and higher frequencies would have been dampened more quickly. The world would have sounded deeper, more muffled, as if heard from underwater or through a thick fog. The sharp crack of a lightning bolt might have been rendered as a dull, heavy thud. The howl of the wind might have been a lower, more resonant moan. The voice of the young earth was a bass voice, a deep and sonorous hum that matched its violent and majestic nature. Beneath all of these audible sounds, the crashes, the winds, the rumbles, the planet hummed with a voice that was entirely imperceptible, a sound too low for any ear to ever hear. This is the world of infrasound, the deep vibrations that are below the threshold of our hearing. Every large, moving object creates these low-frequency waves, from the shifting of tectonic plates to the movement of vast weather systems to the very resonance of the ocean basins. The Earth itself has a fundamental resonant frequency, a constant, deep vibration that is always present, everywhere on the planet. It is the planet's own inaudible song. You can imagine it as the deep, silent thrum of a vast and complex engine, a vibration that permeates every rock, every drop of water, every molecule of air. It is the silent, foundational note upon which the entire planetary symphony is built. And so our world was no longer silent. It was filled with a rich and complex music, a chaotic yet beautiful opera of the elements. It was a planet singing to itself, a vibrant, noisy, and dynamic system. A world of sound, complete in its own elemental majesty, a symphony with no audience, waiting in the deep, warm oceans for the first flicker of life, for the first simple cell that would evolve, over eons, into the first creature that could listen. The symphony of the planet was complete, a resonant world of wind and water and stone, humming its deep elemental song into the silence of space. But in the warm, sunlit shallows of the primordial oceans, a new kind of music was beginning, a sound so subtle and faint it was almost imperceptible against the grand chorus of the earth. This was the quiet hum of life itself. We must descend now, leaving the noisy world of air and waves behind, and sink into the calm, chemical-rich waters of the ancient sea. Here, in this gentle cradle, the first living cells came into being. Their world was not one of sound, but of touch and taste, the universe perceived through the delicate membrane that separated their inner world from the vast ocean outside. For these first simple beings, communication was a purely chemical affair. Imagine a single bacterium, a microscopic miracle of organized matter, drifting on the current. It has no brain, no nerves, no ears, yet it is not inert. It is constantly sensing its surroundings, reading the water's faint chemical messages. A higher concentration of sugar molecules to the left, a trace of a toxic mineral to the right. The cell's membrane acts like a tongue or a nose, tasting the subtle gradients in its environment. And in response, it can move, tumbling its way towards the promise of food or away from the threat of danger. This is the very bedrock of communication. A signal received, an interpretation made, and a meaningful action taken. It is a silent, molecular dialogue between life and its environment, the first and most fundamental conversation of all. As life grew more complex, as single cells began to band together to form the first multicellular organisms, this chemical conversation became more intricate. Now, the cells had to talk not only to the ocean, to the world outside, but to each other. A cell on the sunlit surface of a colony might send a chemical signal deep into the organism's shaded interior, a message written in hormones, a simple piece of information that coordinates the behavior of the whole. This was the beginning of an internal society, a chemical network that allowed millions of individual cells to act as a single, coherent being. And in the great, pressurized darkness of the deep ocean, where the sun's light could not reach and the chemical world was less vibrant, life devised another, utterly different way to speak. Here, in the crushing blackness, communication became a language of light. Bioluminescence. Imagine the scene: a world without sound, a world of absolute darkness and profound silence, suddenly illuminated by the ghostly, silent flashes of strange and beautiful creatures. A pulse of soft blue light from a deep-sea fish to attract a mate, a shimmering green cloud released by a squid to startle a predator, a steady, faint glow from a colony of bacteria living on a decomposing leaf. This was a visual language, a silent, ghostly conversation of living lanterns, a testament to the endless creativity of evolution in solving the fundamental problem of how to connect, how to send a message from one being to another across the empty darkness. But all the while, another channel of communication was slowly opening up, one based on the very vibrations that filled the oceans. While the first creatures had no ears to hear, their very existence began to add a new texture to the water's ancient hum. The geological rumbles of the planet were now overlaid with a biological murmur. Picture a vast reef of primitive sponges, each one a living filter, drawing water through its pores. The collective action of millions of these simple animals would create a subtle but constant current, a faint vibration in the surrounding water. Imagine the gentle, rhythmic pulsing of a primitive jellyfish, its bell contracting and expanding, sending out a soft pressure wave with every movement. Think of the first worms, burrowing in the soft sediment of the ocean floor, their tiny, sinuous motions disturbing the water in a way that was completely new. None of this was intentional. It was not yet a voice. It was simply the incidental noise of life, the unavoidable physical consequence of moving and eating and existing in a liquid world. Yet, it was information. The subtle vibration caused by a trilobite scuttling over a rock was a piece of data, a signal that, if it could be detected, would betray its location to a predator or its presence to a potential mate. And here we find the critical turning point, the slow, evolutionary dawn of intention. In a world now filled with the accidental sounds of living, any creature that could develop even the crudest ability to sense these vibrations would have a tremendous advantage. Perhaps it began with a few specialized cells, sensitive to pressure changes in the water, a simple aquatic sense of touch. These cells would allow an organism to feel the approach of something large, or to detect the frantic movements of struggling prey. And once the ability to listen was born, however primitively, the stage was set for the emergence of a deliberate voice. An organism that could make a vibration on purpose, a sound created not by accident but by design, could begin to manipulate the sensory world of its neighbors. It might be a simple flick of a tail against a stone, a clicking of two shells together, the rubbing of specialized appendages to create a rasping sound. These are the first true signals, the ancestors of all language. It is the profound leap from simply being in the world to intentionally acting upon it, the moment that life stops just making noise and starts, for the very first time, to try and send a message. The ancient, silent conversation of molecules was now being joined by a new, deliberate conversation of vibrations, a drumbeat in the deep that was the true, humble prelude to the first word ever spoken. The intention to be heard was now alive in the world, a nascent desire echoing in the deep oceans. But for that desire to blossom into the rich complexity of a voice, life needed to build a new and masterful instrument, one capable of turning the simple substance of breath into an infinity of sounds. To witness the construction of this instrument, we must leave the watery cradle of the sea and follow life on one of its most audacious journeys. The emergence onto the land. This was a transition of immense consequence, a world of new opportunities and profound challenges. An animal that crawls from the water into the air is entering an alien environment. The rules of gravity, of movement, and most critically, of breathing, are all rewritten. The delicate, feathery gills that so elegantly extracted oxygen from water are utterly useless in the thin, dry air. A new way to breathe was required, and evolution, in its patient and resourceful way, did not invent a solution from scratch, but rather repurposed a piece of existing anatomy. Many ancient, lobe-finned fish, living in stagnant, oxygen-poor waters, had developed a simple sac connected to their gut, a primitive pouch they could fill with gulped air from the surface to supplement their gills. This was the swim bladder, a simple buoyancy device that doubled as a rudimentary lung. And as these creatures began to spend more and more time on land, this simple pouch became the blueprint for one of nature's most beautiful inventions. Over millions of years, it was elaborated upon, expanded, folded inward upon itself again and again, creating an enormous surface area of delicate tissues, a magnificent, branching, tree-like structure designed to drink the oxygen directly from the air. The lungs were born, a powerful and efficient engine for breath. With this new, powerful engine capable of moving a steady column of air, the next step was to find a way to make that column of air vibrate, to turn it into the raw material of sound. For this, we must look to the throat, to a small, elegant structure of cartilage and muscle called the larynx, or the voice box. In most mammals, the larynx sits high up in the throat, a position that allows them to breathe and swallow at the same time. A useful trick for an animal drinking from a waterhole while watchful for predators. Our distant hominid ancestors shared this anatomy, but in our lineage, a strange and wonderful change began to occur. The larynx started to descend, dropping lower in the throat. From a purely survival standpoint, this was a terrible idea. It meant the paths for air and for food now crossed each other, creating a significant and ever-present risk of choking. So why would evolution favor such a dangerous arrangement? The answer lies in the acoustic space that this descent created. By moving lower, the larynx opened up a large, cavernous chamber behind the tongue and above the vocal cords, a space called the pharynx. This chamber is the secret to the richness and versatility of the human voice. It is the resonating body of the instrument. Think of a guitar. The plucking of the string creates a thin, buzzing sound. It is the hollow, wooden body of the guitar that amplifies and enriches that buzz, giving it warmth, volume, and timbre. Our vocal cords are the strings, but our pharynx is the body of the guitar. It is this unique, open, resonating chamber that allows us to form the vast array of vowel sounds that are the backbone of every human language. Deep within the larynx lie the vibrating strings of our voice, the vocal cords. They are not really cords, but two small, delicate folds of mucous membrane stretched across the airway. When we breathe silently, they are held apart, allowing air to pass freely. But when we intend to speak, or to sing, muscles bring them together. As air from the lungs pushes up against this closed gate, pressure builds until it forces the cords apart. The sudden release of air lowers the pressure, and the cords snap shut again. This process repeats with incredible speed, hundreds or even thousands of times per second. This rapid opening and closing chops the smooth stream of air from our lungs into a series of tiny, discrete puffs, creating a pressure wave in the air. A sound. The pitch of that sound is determined by the tension and thickness of the cords. When the muscles pull them tighter and thinner, they vibrate faster, producing a higher note. When they are relaxed and looser, they vibrate more slowly, creating a lower note, just like the strings of a violin. Yet this intricate instrument would be nothing without a master musician to play it, a source of controlled and steady power. This power comes from a magnificent, dome-shaped sheet of muscle at the base of our lungs, called the diaphragm. When we inhale, the diaphragm contracts and flattens, drawing air into the lungs. It is its slow, controlled relaxation that provides the smooth, non-turbulent, and sustained stream of air that is essential for complex speech. It is the diaphragm that allows us to speak in long, flowing sentences, to hold a note while we sing, to whisper a secret, or to shout with joy. And so, the instrument is complete. The powerful bellows of the lungs, the vibrating strings of the vocal cords, the unique resonating chamber of the pharynx, all powered and exquisitely controlled by the steady hand of the diaphragm. Take a slow, deep breath, and feel this ancient and beautiful orchestra within you. an instrument honed over millions of years, silent for a moment, waiting for the command of a mind that has learned how to play its song. The instrument was now complete, a perfect and intricate orchestra of breath and tissue, capable of producing a universe of sound, and it waited in the quiet vessel of the body. But a sound, no matter how beautifully crafted, is only a fleeting disturbance of the air, a transient ripple of pressure destined to fade into nothingness unless it is received, unless it is caught and understood. A voice is only one half of a conversation. The other half is the ear that hears it, and the silent, enchanted loom of the mind that weaves that simple vibration into the rich tapestry of meaning. So now we must journey inward, following the path of a sound wave as it makes its way from the outside world into the deep inner sanctum of the skull, where the magic of listening happens. The outer ear, the visible part of this incredible structure, acts as a gentle funnel, catching the vibrations traveling through the air and guiding them down a narrow canal to a delicate, taut membrane. The eardrum. Here, the story of sound is passed from the medium of air to the medium of solid bone. On the other side of the eardrum lies a tiny, air-filled chamber, the middle ear, and within it, the three smallest bones in the entire human body: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, more poetically known as the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. These tiny bones have one of the most remarkable stories in all of evolution. They were not always nestled deep within our heads, dedicated to the task of hearing. If we could travel back more than 300 million years, we would find these same bones in a very different place, serving a very different purpose. We would find them as part of the powerful, complex jaw of our distant, reptile-like ancestors. As the first mammals evolved from these reptilian forebears, the structure of the jaw began to simplify and change, and these particular bones became redundant, no longer needed for chewing. But evolution is a master of economy. It rarely discards useful parts. Over countless generations, these three small bones of the jaw began to shrink, to detach, and to migrate slowly upwards into the skull, where they took on an entirely new function. They formed a delicate, articulated chain, a system of levers that would receive the vibrations from the larger eardrum and amplify them, concentrating their force onto a much smaller membrane called the oval window. This was the gateway to the inner ear and to an entirely new world of perception. This incredible journey, from the jaw of a reptile to the ear of a mammal, is a beautiful testament to the patient, improvisational genius of the natural world. Beyond the oval window lies the inner sanctum, a fluid-filled, bony labyrinth. And coiled within it, like a tiny, fossilized snail shell, is the cochlea. This is the true heart of hearing, the place where the physical world of vibration is finally translated into the electrochemical language of the brain. The cochlea is, in essence, a biological prism for sound. As the stirrup bone taps against the oval window, it sends a pressure wave rippling through the fluid inside this spiral. Lining the spiral is a delicate membrane, the basilar membrane, which is covered in thousands upon thousands of exquisitely sensitive hair cells. The membrane is a marvel of biological engineering. It is wide and flexible at one end of the spiral, and narrow and stiff at the other. This allows it to respond to different frequencies at different points along its length. High-pitched, rapid vibrations cause the stiff base of the membrane to resonate, while deep, slow, low-pitched vibrations travel all the way to the flexible apex. It functions like the strings of a harp or the keys of a piano, laid out in a perfect, logarithmic spiral. As a particular spot on the membrane vibrates, the tiny hair cells attached to it are bent, and this physical bending opens microscopic channels in the cells, allowing charged ions to rush in. This creates a tiny spark of electricity, a nerve impulse. The mechanical dance of sound has been converted into a signal that the brain can finally understand. This electrical signal, this coded message describing the pitch, loudness, and timbre of the sound, now travels at lightning speed along the auditory nerve, deep into the brain's temporal lobes, to a region known as the auditory cortex. And here, we find another miracle of organization. The brain itself honors the beautiful frequency-based layout of the cochlea. The neurons in the auditory cortex are arranged in what is called a tonotopic map. Neurons that respond to low frequencies are clustered in one area, while neurons that respond to high frequencies are clustered in another. When we hear a sound, it is as if a chord is being played upon this neural keyboard, a specific pattern of neurons firing in concert. But the brain does so much more than simply register a collection of notes. It is a master of pattern recognition. It takes this raw data and, in an instant, it begins to weave it into a coherent perception. It separates the sound of a voice from the rustling of leaves in the background, a feat of filtering that we are only just beginning to replicate with our most advanced computers. It recognizes the unique timbre of a particular instrument, the rhythmic pattern of a footstep, the melodic contour of a question, and most importantly, through experience, it begins to attach meaning to these patterns. This specific pattern of frequencies is the comforting voice of a parent. This sharp, sudden crack is the danger of a breaking branch. The physical system is now complete. The expressive instrument of the voice is perfectly paired with the perceptive instrument of the ear and brain. The hardware is in place, ready and waiting for the software of the mind to learn how to use it, to move beyond simple sounds and into the boundless world of shared meaning. The hardware was in place, a vocal tract capable of extraordinary expression and an auditory system of exquisite sensitivity. A silent stage awaiting the actors. To understand how the first scenes of our linguistic story were performed, we must travel to a different time and a different place, into the warm, green, and noisy world of our primate ancestors. Let your mind drift into the high canopy of an ancient African forest. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and blossoms, and it is alive with a cacophony of sound, the buzz of insects, the chirping of birds, and underpinning it all, the rich and varied chorus of monkeys and apes. This is not mere noise, it is a complex tapestry of social information, a constant, flowing conversation that regulates the life of the forest. And if we listen closely, we can begin to hear the precursors to our own voice, the humble origins of the language we now speak. Let us observe, for a moment, a troop of vervet monkeys. Their lives are fraught with peril from predators above and below, and to survive, they have developed a sophisticated vocal alarm system. A scout spots a leopard slinking through the undergrowth and lets out a sharp, barking call. Instantly, the entire troop abandons the ground and scrambles into the high, thin branches of the trees. A little later, a different call rings out, a short, stuttering shriek. This is the eagle alarm. The monkeys immediately look up and run for the cover of the densest foliage. A third call, a low, chuttering sound, signals the presence of a snake and sends the monkeys standing up on their hind legs, peering intently into the grass around them. This system is, in many ways, remarkable. It contains the basic elements of language. There are distinct sounds, or words, that are reliably associated with specific things in the world, the meanings. And these sounds produce appropriate, life-saving behaviors in the listeners. Yet, there is a profound difference between the call of a vervet monkey and a human sentence. The monkey's vocabulary is innate, hardwired into its brain. A young vervet does not need to be taught what a leopard is, or what call to make. The sight of the predator automatically triggers the corresponding vocalization. It is a direct, unfiltered, and emotional response, controlled by the deep, ancient structures of the brain's limbic system. A monkey cannot choose to make the leopard call when there is no leopard. It cannot use the call to lie or to talk about the leopard it saw yesterday. Its communication is trapped in the immediate, emotional present. It is a language of here and now, a system of involuntary reactions rather than considered, intentional statements. This emotional, involuntary nature is the deep inheritance of all primate vocalizations, from the gentle coo of a chimpanzee to the mighty roar of a gorilla. So, if their vocalizations were so limited, how did our ancestors manage the incredibly complex social lives for which primates are so famous? The answer may lie in the social brain hypothesis. The idea that the primary driving force behind the evolution of our large brains was not the challenge of finding food or using tools, but the immense cognitive demands of navigating a complex web of social relationships. In a large group, An individual needs to keep track of dozens of others. Who is dominant? Who is subordinate? Who is a reliable ally? Who is a potential rival? Who holds a grudge? This requires memory, calculation, and a keen understanding of others' motivations. For a long time, the primary tool for cementing social bonds in this complex world was physical touch, specifically social grooming. The patient, intimate act of picking through a companion's fur is not just about hygiene, it is a profound expression of trust and alliance. But grooming has a limitation. You can only do it with one individual at a time. As our ancestors' groups grew larger and larger, the time required for grooming everyone would have become unsustainable. Some theorists believe that language, in its earliest form, evolved as a kind of vocal grooming, a way to service multiple social relationships simultaneously. A gentle, pleasant stream of vocalizations could convey a message of comfort and solidarity to several allies at once, a far more efficient method for maintaining the cohesion of a large group. And beneath all of this, a quiet revolution was happening at the level of the individual neuron. Neuroscientists discovered a remarkable class of brain cells known as mirror neurons. These cells are active when a monkey performs a specific action, such as reaching for a peanut. But what is truly astonishing is that these very same cells also fire when the monkey is perfectly still and simply watches another individual perform that same action. The brain, in essence, creates an internal simulation of the other's experience. It mirrors the action, creating a direct, non-intellectual understanding of what the other is doing, and perhaps even what they are intending. This neural bridge between self and other is thought to be the very foundation of empathy, of imitation, and of our ability to understand each other's minds. It created a shared world of experience, a common ground upon which the first seeds of shared meaning could be planted. And so, we were poised at a critical threshold. We had inherited from our primate ancestors a brain built for sociality, a voice tied to deep emotion, and a neural system that allowed us to feel another's experience as our own. We were masters of the emotional here and now, but the vast, open landscapes of the past, the future, and the imagination remained unspoken, waiting for a new kind of key to unlock them. We had inherited a voice tied to emotion and a mind wired for social connection, but we remained tethered to the world of the immediate, the concrete, the here and now. The great, imaginative leap into the past, the future, and the purely conceptual required a new kind of key, a way to unlock intentional and abstract thought. And the story of that key may begin not with the voice, but with the hands. Let your mind drift back to a quiet evening scene, perhaps 100,000 years ago. A small group of our ancestors is gathered around the warmth of a flickering fire. The day's hunt is over. The food has been shared. A profound quiet settles over the group, yet a conversation is taking place. It is a conversation woven not from sound, but from the silent, eloquent dance of hands. A skilled elder is recounting the day's events, not with grunts or calls, but with gestures. He traces the shape of the deer's antlers in the air. He mimes the arc of the thrown spear. He uses his hands to show the path the animal took through the forest. This is the core idea of the gestural theory of language origin. The compelling notion that before we spoke, we signed. It is an idea that resonates with our modern intuition. Even now, with all the richness of our spoken languages, we cannot help but to speak with our hands. We point to indicate direction. We shape our hands to describe an object. We use gestures to add emphasis and emotion. A silent, secondary language that flows in perfect concert with our words. This deep connection between our hands and our speech is not a coincidence. It is written into the very architecture of our brains. Deep within the frontal lobe lies a region known as Broca's area, a part of the cerebral cortex that is absolutely essential for the production of spoken language. Damage to this area can leave a person unable to form coherent sentences, even though they may still understand words perfectly well. But what is truly fascinating is that Broca's area is not just for talking. It is also a critical hub for complex, sequential motor control, especially the fine movements of the hands. In our primate cousins, the equivalent brain region is used to control the intricate motions of the hands and mouth needed for tasks like cracking open a hard nut This suggests that the advanced neural machinery required for the complex, sequential muscle movements of speech was not created from scratch. Instead, it was built upon a much older foundation, a pre-existing system that had already been refined for the purpose of deliberate, skillful action with the hands. The stage was set for our hands to become our first true voice. And at the very same time that these neural pathways were developing, our hands were being given a new and profound education. Bipedalism had freed them from the demands of locomotion, and they were now able to specialize, to become dedicated tools of manipulation and creation. This is the era of the first stone tools. Imagine an early hominid, perhaps Homo habilis, the handy man, sitting by a riverbed. He is not just banging rocks together randomly. He is selecting a specific type of stone, a core, and with another stone, a hammer. He is striking it at a precise angle to flake off a sharp-edged piece. This simple act is the beginning of a cognitive revolution. It requires foresight, planning, and a controlled sequence of actions. These are the very same mental abilities that underpin the structure of grammar. The creation of a simple Alderman chopper is a kind of physical sentence, a series of ordered steps to achieve a desired goal. And as time went on, the tools became ever more sophisticated. The Acheulean hand axe, crafted by later ancestors like Homo erectus, is a thing of remarkable beauty and symmetry, a teardrop-shaped tool that remains largely unchanged in the archaeological record for over 1 million years. This implies the existence of a clear mental template, an abstract idea of the perfect hand axe that was being passed down from one generation to the next. How was this complex skill taught? It was likely a silent apprenticeship, a master napper showing a novice, using gesture and demonstration to convey the precise sequence of strikes, the correct angle, the necessary force. It was a language of action, a conversation conducted through the medium of stone. This deep entanglement of thinking and doing, of mind and body, is the central idea of what is known as embodied cognition. This theory suggests that our minds are not like abstract computer programs divorced from our physical selves. Instead, our very thoughts and concepts are shaped by the fact that we have bodies that move and interact with a physical world. Our understanding of a concept like up is not an abstract definition, but is deeply rooted in our lifelong physical experience of gravity. We understand the world by enacting it. And so, language may not have begun as an abstract code, but as a physical performance. To speak of the river was to make a flowing gesture with the hand. To speak of the bison was to hold 2 hands to the head like horns. This was not yet a symbolic system, but an iconic one, a direct, physical representation of the world. The hands, liberated by our upright stance and tutored by the patient craft of tool-making, became our first canvas for intentional, meaningful communication. They wove the first stories in the air around the ancient fires, creating the cognitive habits of sequencing and representation that would pave the way for a new kind of language, one that would eventually be taken up by the voice, but whose deep, gestural soul would forever remain. The silent language of the hands had created a bridge from one mind to another, allowing our ancestors to share their immediate world through a rich dance of iconic representation. But language, in its deepest and most powerful form, requires a journey into a new kind of territory, a great, imaginative leap away from the tangible world of things that can be pointed to and mimed. It requires the birth of the symbol. To understand this profound shift, we must first appreciate the nature of a sign. Some signs are iconic. They look like the thing they represent. A simple drawing of the sun is an icon for the sun. Other signs are indexical. They have a direct, physical connection to their object. Smoke is an index of fire. A footprint in the mud is an index of the animal that passed by. But the symbol is a revolutionary invention. A symbol has no inherent connection to the thing it represents. Its meaning is based purely on a shared agreement, a social convention. The sound water, or the written letters, WATER, have nothing in them that is wet, or flowing, or liquid. They mean water for one reason, and one reason only, because a community of English speakers has agreed that they do. This is the magical act of abstraction that untethers language from the physical world. With symbols, we can suddenly speak of things that are not here, things that have never been, and things that can never be. We can speak of tomorrow's hunt, of our feelings of gratitude, of the spirits of our ancestors, of the concept of justice. The world of the imagination is thrown open, and human consciousness is forever changed. This was not a gradual shift, but a veritable explosion of cognitive ability, a period archaeologists call the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, which began to sweep across the human population around 50,000 years ago. In the layers of earth from this time, we stop finding just stone tools and animal bones, and we begin to find the unmistakable evidence of a symbolic mind at work. We find the first stirrings of art, of ritual, and of personal identity. Imagine the quiet thrill of an archaeologist gently brushing the dust from a small, delicate object unearthed at a site like Blombos Cave in South Africa. It is a tiny seashell, no bigger than a fingernail, and near its hinge, someone, some 75,000 years ago, has deliberately and carefully bored a small hole. It is a bead. Nearby, other shells are found, all pierced in the same way. This is the earliest known jewellery in the world, and its importance is impossible to overstate. A necklace of shells has no practical function. It will not help you hunt, or stay warm, or find shelter. Its function is purely symbolic. It is a statement. It might declare I belong to this group, or I have this status, or simply, I am me. It is the birth of an identity that is separate from the physical body, an identity that is constructed from shared meaning. At these same ancient sites, we find another clue. Large quantities of red ochre, a soft, iron-rich stone that can be ground into a brilliant red pigment. For thousands of years, our ancestors were gathering this material, grinding it into powder, and presumably using it to paint something. Perhaps they painted their own bodies for rituals, or decorated their animal skin shelters, or imbued their hunting weapons with a symbolic power. The act of adding colour to the world is an act of adding a layer of meaning, of transforming a simple object into a symbol. On some of these pieces of ochre, we find the first abstract designs ever created, a series of deliberate, cross-hatched lines, the geometric pattern. This is not a picture of anything in the real world. It is the product of a mind that can think in patterns, in abstractions, a mind that is beginning to create a new, symbolic universe. And this universe finds its most breathtaking expression in the deep, silent caves of Europe. Let your mind drift into the darkness of Chauvet Cave, 30,000 years ago. You move by the light of a flickering animal fat lamp deep into the belly of the earth, and then the light catches the walls, and they explode into life. Hundreds of animals, horses, lions, mammoths, and bison are painted with such skill and vitality that they seem to be moving in the dancing light. This is more than just decoration. This is a sacred space, a cathedral of symbols, a place where the real world of the hunt and the spirit world of the myth come together. For any of this to be possible, for a bead to signify identity or a painting to represent a spirit, a final cognitive tool must be in place. A sophisticated theory of mind. This is the deep, intuitive understanding that other beings have minds just like your own, with their own beliefs, desires, and intentions. When one of our ancestors made the sound lion, they had to trust that their companion would understand they were referring to the dangerous feline, and not just making a meaningless noise. They had to be able to see the world from another's perspective. It is this capacity for shared intentionality, for creating a common ground of understanding, that allows a community to agree on the meaning of a symbol. And once that happens, the world is fundamentally doubled. There is the physical world of trees and stones and rivers, and now, existing alongside it, is a shared, invisible world of stories, myths, laws, and identities. Humanity was beginning to wrap itself in a web of meaning of its own creation. This symbolic consciousness was the fertile ground from which true language, with its infinite creativity, would finally grow, allowing us not just to describe the world as it is, but to imagine it and to create it as it could be. The human mind, now alight with the fire of symbolic thought, had created a shared, invisible world of meaning. The caves were painted, the dead were buried with reverence, and the first stories were likely being told through the eloquent dance of hands. This new, symbolic software was running on the ancient hardware of the primate brain. But was that hardware itself changing? Did the evolution of language leave its own subtle signature, its own ghost, in the very molecules of our being? To find out, we must turn away from the grand scale of art and archaeology and journey deep into the microscopic, spiraling universe that exists within each one of our cells. We must search for the origins of language in our genome. Now, it is important to say that there is no single language gene, no one stretch of DNA that magically bestowed upon us the gift of speech. Language is a vast and complex tapestry, woven from countless genetic threads that influence everything from the structure of our brains to the shape of our throats. But in recent years, one of these threads has come into the light, giving us a tantalizing glimpse into the biological underpinnings of our unique voice. Its name is FOXP2. The story of FOXP2 begins not in an ancient fossil, but in a modern hospital in Britain, with a family known to science only by the initials KE. For generations, this large, extended family had been haunted by a mysterious affliction. About half of its members suffered from a severe and specific disorder of speech. They struggled to make the fine, coordinated movements of their lips and tongue that are necessary for clear articulation. Their speech was slurred, difficult to understand, and they also had profound difficulties with the finer points of grammar, like correctly forming the past tense of a verb. For years, the cause was a mystery. Then, in the 1990s, using the powerful new tools of genetic sequencing, scientists began to hunt through the family's DNA. They discovered that every single afflicted family member shared the exact same tiny mutation, a single misplaced letter in the code of a single gene located on chromosome 7. This gene was FOXP2. For the first time, a direct, concrete link had been forged between a specific gene and the human ability to speak. So what does this supposed language gene actually do? It does not, of course, contain the instructions for nouns or verbs. Its role is far more subtle and far more profound. FOXP2 is what is known as a transcription factor. You can think of your genome as a vast library containing thousands of different instruction manuals, or genes. A transcription factor is like a master librarian who walks through the stacks and decides which manuals should be read, and when. FOXP2's job is to switch on and off a whole network of other genes, and it is particularly active during embryonic development, playing a crucial role in building the structures of the brain, the lungs, and the nervous system. The specific difficulties of the KE family revealed its most important function for language. It is essential for wiring the neural circuits that control fine motor sequencing. Language, after all, is not just a mental process. It is a stunningly complex physical performance. To speak a simple sentence requires hundreds of muscles in our face, larynx, tongue, and chest to contract and relax in a perfectly timed and coordinated sequence. FOXP2 is one of the master architects that helps build the parts of the brain, particularly in a region called the basal ganglia, that make this oral athleticism possible. This discovery opened up a fascinating new window into our evolutionary past. Scientists began to compare the human version of the FOXP2 gene with that of other animals. They found that the gene is incredibly ancient, and its sequence is highly conserved across most vertebrates, meaning it has changed very little over hundreds of millions of years. The version in a mouse, for example, is almost identical to the version in a crocodile. But when they compared the human sequence to that of our closest living relative, the chimpanzee, they found a startling difference. There were two key changes, two new amino acids in the protein that the human gene produces. This is a clear sign of strong, positive selection, a hint that these changes conferred a significant advantage on our ancestors. And when scientists dated these mutations, they found that they likely swept through the human population and became universal sometime within the last 200,000 years, a time frame that aligns beautifully with the emergence of anatomically modern humans and the symbolic revolution we see in the archaeological record. The story grew even more intriguing when we finally managed to sequence the DNA from ancient Neanderthal bones. Scientists found that Neanderthals, our enigmatic, long-lost cousins, shared the exact same two human mutations in their FOXP2 gene. Whatever advantage these changes conferred, whatever potential for fine motor control it unlocked, we were not the only ones to possess it. FOXP2 is not the answer to the origin of language, but it is a profoundly important clue. It represents a subtle but critical upgrade to our neural hardware, a fine-tuning of the systems that allow us to translate the abstract symbols in our minds into the clear, crisp, and articulate sounds of a spoken word. It is a silent witness, a molecular ghost in our genome that speaks of a time when our very biology was being sculpted for speech, preparing our species for the great, endless conversation that was about to begin. The potential for symbolic thought was now ignited in the human mind, and the fine-tuning of our genome had given us the vocal dexterity to produce a rich palette of articulate sounds. We had the colours, and we had the canvas. But a collection of words, like a collection of beautiful pigments, is not yet a painting. A list of sounds is not a language. The final and most revolutionary invention was still to come. The discovery of a way to weave these individual words together into threads of elaborate meaning. This is the magic of grammar, the beautiful, invisible architecture that holds our thoughts together. Imagine the difference. An early human, with only a handful of words, might be able to say, lion, waterhole, danger. The message is urgent, and it is understood. But with the power of grammar, a whole new world of expression becomes possible. One can now say, be careful when you go to the waterhole, because the lion that stole our kill yesterday is hiding in the tall grass behind the acacia tree. The first is a warning. The second is a story, rich with detail, history, and foresight. The transformative power that bridges this gap is syntax. Many linguists believe that language did not spring forth fully formed, but that it passed through an intermediate stage, a proto-language, much like the first, simple warning. This early form of speech would have consisted mostly of what we call content words, nouns for things and people, and verbs for actions. Words like rock, eat, give, woman, fire. These words would have been strung together in simple 2- or 3-word combinations, their meaning heavily dependent on context and gesture. It would have been a language of the concrete, a powerful tool for coordinating hunts or sharing simple information, but it would have lacked the ability to express nuance, to talk about complex relationships, or to venture far beyond the immediate here and now. The great leap forward, the innovation that turned this simple proto-language into the explosive, creative force we know today, was the discovery of a set of rules for combining words in a structured way. And perhaps the most powerful of these rules is the principle of recursion. Recursion is the ability to embed a phrase or a clause inside another phrase of the same type, creating a potentially infinite loop of complexity. It is like a set of Russian nesting dolls, where each doll contains a smaller, but complete, doll inside it. In language, we can start with a simple sentence. The hunter saw the bison. Now, we can use recursion to embed a new clause, describing the hunter. The hunter, who was patient, saw the bison. We can do it again, describing the bison. The hunter who was patient saw the bison that was drinking from the river. We can add another clause, describing the river. The hunter who was patient saw the bison that was drinking from the river that flows from the mountain. There is no logical limit to this process. This single, elegant trick is what gives language its infinite, generative power. With a finite number of words and a handful of rules like recursion, we can generate a limitless number of new, meaningful sentences, thoughts that have never been spoken or thought before. The linguist Noam Chomsky was so struck by this incredible power that he proposed a radical idea that the basic scaffolding for grammar, what he called universal grammar, is not something we learn, but something we are born with. He argued that the human brain comes equipped with an innate language acquisition device, a kind of universal operating system that already understands the fundamental principles of syntax, like recursion. The specific language a child learns is determined by their culture, but the underlying ability to recognize its deep structure is a shared, biological inheritance of our species. This beautiful, complex architecture is built from two different kinds of materials. There are the content words, the heavy bricks of the sentence that carry the bulk of the meaning. Lion, river, chase. And then there are the function words, the small, almost invisible words that act as the mortar, holding the bricks together and defining their relationship. These are the prepositions like in, on, at, the articles, the and a, the conjunctions and, but, because these humble, hard-working words are the true engines of syntax. They are the gears and levers that allow us to specify location, time, cause, and effect. Without them, we are trapped in a simple list of things and actions. With them, we can build palaces of thought. With the birth of syntax, the final, essential piece of the puzzle of language clicked into place. Grammar is not a dry set of rules to be memorized. It is the living, breathing loom upon which we weave the very fabric of our reality. It allows us to travel through time, to link cause with effect, to ask questions, to express doubt, to build complex, shared worlds entirely out of sound. Humanity now possessed a tool of unprecedented power, a tool that would be passed not through the slow, patient process of genetic inheritance, but through the gentle, intimate act of a parent speaking to a child, a lullaby containing the seeds of a whole new world. The great and powerful loom of grammar was now in place, a tool capable of weaving the threads of individual words into the infinite fabric of human thought. This remarkable invention would not be passed down through the slow, patient code of our genes, but through a far more direct and intimate process, the simple, magical act of a parent speaking to a child. The journey of language now becomes the journey of every single human being, a story that repeats with every birth, a miracle that unfolds in every cradle across the world. To understand it, we must shrink our perspective, from the grand sweep of millennia to the quiet, sensory world of a single, developing mind. Our linguistic journey begins even before we take our first breath. In the final trimester of pregnancy, nestled in the warm, dark, and watery world of the womb, a baby's ears are already developed enough to hear. The sounds of the outside world are distant and muffled, but the sounds of the mother's body are a constant presence. The steady, rhythmic drum of her heartbeat, the rush of her blood, and, most importantly, the melodic, rising and falling cadence of her voice. The specific words are lost, filtered through fluid and tissue, but the music of her language, its unique rhythm and intonation, becomes the first lullaby, the first familiar song that the nascent brain learns to recognize. From the moment of birth, the brain of a newborn is not a blank slate, but a marvel of preparation, an instrument primed and hungry for the patterns of speech. For the first few years of life, a child passes through what is known as the critical period for language acquisition. During this time, the brain is exquisitely plastic, its neural circuits yearning to be shaped by linguistic input. It is a window of effortless learning, a time when the impossibly complex task of deciphering a language is accomplished with a speed and intuitive grace that no adult can ever hope to replicate. A child who is not exposed to language during this crucial window may never be able to learn it to a native fluency. The brain is expecting language, and if the world does not provide it, a fundamental part of its architecture may never fully form. And so, the baby listens. And as it listens, it begins its own journey of vocal discovery. It begins with cooing, the soft, happy, open vowel sounds that are the first playful explorations of the vocal cords. Then, around the age of 6 months, a new and wonderful stage begins. Babbling, the baby starts to combine consonants and vowels into repetitive syllables. Da-da-da, ma-ma-ma, ba-ba-ba. To a parent's ear, it is a delightful, but perhaps random, form of play. But in reality, it is one of the most important practice sessions of a human life. The baby is rehearsing the fundamental building blocks of speech, the phonemes of language, strengthening the neural pathways between the brain and the muscles of the mouth. At first, a babbling baby will produce sounds from all the languages of the world, a universal, phonetic vocabulary. But as the weeks go by, it begins to narrow its repertoire, selectively practicing only those sounds that it hears in its native tongue, a process known as babbling drift. And all the while, the world is speaking back to the baby in a very special way. Across every culture ever studied, adults instinctively change the way they speak when addressing an infant. This is called parentese or motherese. It is not the nonsensical gibberish of baby talk, but a modified, musical form of real speech. The pitch of the voice becomes higher, the tempo slows down, the intonation is exaggerated into great, swooping, melodic arcs, and words and phrases are repeated. This is a natural, evolved teaching tool. The higher pitch grabs the baby's attention. The emotional, musical quality soothes and communicates feeling. And the slow, clear, repetitive structure helps the infant's brain to identify the boundaries between words in the fast, flowing stream of normal adult speech. And how does the infant's brain perform this incredible feat of passing a continuous river of sound into discrete words? It does so not by understanding definitions, but by being the most powerful pattern detection machine on the planet. The baby's mind is engaging in a process of statistical learning. Unconsciously, automatically, its brain is tracking the probabilities of which syllables follow which other syllables. It learns that the syllable hap is very frequently followed by pi, and that pi is very often followed by bar, and that bar by bi. But it also learns that the syllable pi is almost never followed by the syllable the. By noticing these statistical regularities, the baby's brain begins to discover the word boundaries. It learns that happy baby is likely 2 units, because the statistical link between pi and bar is strong, but the link between pi and the would be weak. And so, after months of listening, of absorbing the melody of its mother tongue, of practicing the sounds in its own babbling, and of running a constant, subconscious statistical analysis on the language it hears, a moment of pure magic occurs. The child connects a sound pattern to a person, an object, a meaning. A finger points, and a voice, its own voice, says mama, or dada, or doggy. The first word. The circle is complete. The ancient, collective inheritance of language has now been successfully planted in a new and unique mind, a single, precious seed from which an entire inner world will grow. A single seed of language, planted in the fertile ground of a young mind, grows into the rich and complex inner world of an individual. But as we zoom out from this intimate scene of a single child learning a single tongue, we are met with a breathtaking and bewildering vista. The sheer, stunning diversity of human language. There are, at this moment, more than 7,000 distinct languages spoken across our planet, a vibrant chorus of voices from the bustling streets of Tokyo to the quiet rainforests of the Amazon. How did this happen? If we all share a common ancestry, if all language ultimately springs from the same human minds, why is it not a single, unified river, but a delta of thousands of diverging streams? To understand this, we must return to the grand story of human migration and imagine that first language, perhaps spoken by a small group of our Homo sapiens ancestors in Africa, as a single, mighty river. For thousands of years, this river flowed as one. But then, humanity began to move. Small groups broke away, venturing out of Africa and beginning the long, slow journey to populate the rest of the planet. And each time a group split off, a new tributary was formed from the main river of language. As these small bands of hunter-gatherers spread across the continents, they became separated from one another by vast distances, by impassable mountains, by wide oceans, by sprawling deserts. This geographical isolation is the great engine of linguistic diversity. A language is not a fixed, static object. It is a living, fluid system, constantly changing in the mouths of its speakers. And when 2 groups of speakers are separated, their languages begin to change in different ways. They begin to drift apart. Over time, the slow accumulation of tiny, imperceptible changes in pronunciation, in vocabulary, and in grammar builds and builds, until, after centuries or millennia, the 2 dialects have become so different from one another that they are no longer mutually intelligible. They have become 2 new, distinct languages. This is how the great language families of the world were born. Just as biologists can trace the lineage of species back to a common ancestor, historical linguists can trace languages back to a common source. English, for example, is part of the Germanic language family, a close cousin to German, Dutch, and Swedish. The Germanic family, in turn, is a single branch of a much larger tree, the vast Indo-European family, which also includes the Romance languages like French and Spanish, the Slavic languages like Russian and Polish, and the Indo-Aryan languages like Hindi and Bengali. How can we possibly know the shape of these ancient family trees? We do it by using the comparative method, a kind of linguistic archaeology. Scholars look for systematic, regular similarities between languages, especially in their core vocabulary, words for things that are universal to the human experience, like numbers, body parts, and family relationships. For example, the word for two is two in English, zwei in German, dva in Russian, duo in Latin, and dva in Sanskrit. By comparing these words and tracing the predictable ways that sounds shift over time, the way aid sound in one language can become a ate sound in another. For instance, linguists can work their way backward. They can reconstruct, with a surprising degree of confidence, the words of the long-extinct parent language. They can listen to the faint echoes of Proto-Indo-European, a language spoken some 6,000 years ago, likely on the steppes of Eurasia, a language that was never written down, but whose ghostly presence can still be felt in nearly half the languages spoken on Earth today. This constant, inexorable process of change is driven by several forces. Pronunciations shift naturally from one generation to the next, like a message whispered down a very long line. The meanings of words themselves drift over time. The English word silly once meant blessed or holy, and languages are constantly borrowing from one another. When two cultures meet, they trade words, as surely as they trade goods and ideas. The English language itself is a glorious mosaic of borrowed words, a testament to a long history of invasions and cultural exchanges, with a Germanic foundation, a vast overlay of French and Latin, and countless words from Norse, Greek, and languages from every corner of the world. And so, the great river of language that began in Africa has spent the last 60,000 years branching and meandering, splitting and converging, carving thousands of unique channels through the landscape of human culture. This beautiful, bewildering diversity is not a curse, not a confusion of tongues as in the story of Babel. It is a testament to the endless creativity of the human mind and a living map of our species' long and winding journey across the face of the earth. Each language is a unique worldview, a different way of seeing and being, a distinct melody in the grand human chorus. The long journey of humanity, a slow and patient branching of peoples and cultures, had created a magnificent and diverse chorus of over 7,000 distinct languages. Each of these tongues, a unique stream flowing from the same ancient source, had carved its own path through the landscape of the human mind. This leads us to one of the most enchanting and wondrous questions in the study of language. Does the riverbed of our mother tongue guide the very flow of our thoughts? Does the language we speak change the way we see the world? This is the beautiful idea of linguistic relativity, the theory that our language provides us with a special set of lenses, a unique framework through which we perceive and interpret the grand spectacle of reality. It does not suggest that our language creates a prison for our minds, locking us into a single, inescapable worldview. Rather, it proposes something far more gentle and subtle, that the language we inherit from our culture furnishes the rooms of our consciousness in a particular way, making certain ideas more obvious, certain distinctions easier to notice, and certain paths of thought more comfortable to walk. Let us begin with the simple, sensory experience of colour. In the physical world, there are no distinct bands of colour in a rainbow. There is only a smooth, continuous spectrum of light, a seamless transition from one wavelength to the next. It is our language that compels us to carve this spectrum up into discrete, named categories. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. But where, precisely, does blue end and green begin? The answer, it turns out, depends entirely on the language you speak. In English, we have one basic word for blue. We can talk about light blue or dark blue, but they are both considered shades of the same fundamental color. In the Russian language, however, there are two distinct basic words: Goluboy for light blue and Sinii for dark blue. For a native Russian speaker, these are not shades of a single color, but are as different as red is from pink for an English speaker. And this linguistic difference has a real, measurable effect on perception. Scientific experiments have shown that Russian speakers are measurably faster at distinguishing between two shades of blue, if one falls into the Goluboy category and the other into the Sinii category. Their language has trained their brains to be more sensitive to this particular color boundary. This is not to say that language gives us superpowers, but that it fine-tunes our attention. The Himba people of northern Namibia offer another beautiful example. Their language carves up the color spectrum in a way that is very different from most European languages. They use a single word, serandu, to describe many shades that an English speaker would call red, orange, or pink. And another word, buru, is used for a wide range of greens, blues, and even some purples. And yet, the Himba language has a rich and varied vocabulary for different shades of what we would just call green, distinguishing between them with a subtlety that is lost on an outsider. It is not that a Himba speaker cannot physically see the difference between a red and a pink object, but their language has not encouraged them to make that a primary, habitual distinction. Their linguistic lens focuses their attention on other parts of the spectrum. This influence extends from the sensory world of color into the abstract realm of time. In English, and in most European languages, we have a powerful and pervasive metaphor for time. Time is a road we travel along. The future is in front of us. The past is behind us. We look forward to the weekend, and we put the past behind us. But this is not the only way to imagine time. The Aymara people, who live in the Andes Mountains of South America, have a conception of time that is, to us, inverted. In their language and in their gestures, the past is in front of them, and the future is behind them. Their word for past, neira, also means eye or front. Their word for future, kipa, also means back or behind, and their logic is perfectly sound. The past is what has already happened. It is known. It has been seen. Therefore, it lies in our field of vision, in front of us. The future is unknown, unseen, and unknowable. Therefore, it must lie behind our backs. Their language has encoded a completely different, yet equally valid, metaphor for our journey through time. Perhaps most profoundly, language can shape our very sense of space and our place within it. Languages like English predominantly use a relative, egocentric frame of reference. We describe the location of objects in relation to our own bodies. The cup is to the left of the plate. The ball is in front of the chair. But this is not a human universal. The Gugu Yimithir people, an Aboriginal group in northern Australia, speak a language that has no words for left or right. Instead, they exclusively use an absolute frame of reference, the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. They would not say, "You have a spider on your left leg." They would say, "You have a spider on your southwest leg." To speak their language, one must be in a constant, subconscious state of geographic awareness, a kind of internal compass that is always active. This linguistic requirement fosters a cognitive skill that seems almost superhuman to us. And so, our mother tongue does not build the walls of our mental prison. Instead, it is the familiar architecture of our mental home. It shapes the hallways of our habits and furnishes the rooms of our perception. To learn another language is therefore a profound act of empathy. It is to be invited into another's home, to see the world from another window, and to understand that the reality we inhabit is but one magnificent version among thousands. Each language, a unique and flowing river of thought, carried within its currents a distinct worldview, a particular way of seeing and being. But this river was, for almost all of human history, an entirely ephemeral thing. A spoken word is a delicate puff of air, a fleeting vibration that exists for a brief and brilliant moment and then vanishes forever into silence. For hundreds of thousands of years, the entirety of a culture's knowledge, its stories, its laws, its history, and its wisdom was held captive within the fragile and finite vessel of human memory. A people's entire library was stored in the minds of its elders, a precious and vulnerable archive that could be wiped out by a single bad winter or a sudden illness. But then, in a few places on Earth, a technology of true magic was invented, a technology that would allow a fleeting thought to be given a physical body, a technology that could freeze the river of spoken words and give them a permanence that defied time and death. This was the invention of writing. This was not an easy or an obvious invention. It was a cognitive leap of such immense difficulty that it appears to have occurred spontaneously only 3 or 4 times in the entire history of our species. In ancient Sumer in Mesopotamia, in China, and in Mesoamerica with the Mayans, with Egypt being another likely independent case. Every other one of the thousands of writing systems that have ever existed has been a descendant of one of these, or was created with the knowledge that writing was possible. It was a revolution that began, quite humbly, with pictures. The earliest forms of writing were pictographic. If you wanted to record the concept of a cow, you drew a simple picture of a cow's head. This is intuitive and direct, but also profoundly limited. It is easy to draw a cow, or a sun, or a man. But how do you draw a picture of love, or belief, or because? To express the full range of human thought, writing had to evolve beyond simple pictures of things. The next great step was the creation of a logographic system, where a symbol, which may or may not have started as a picture, comes to represent not the object itself, but the word for that object. The symbol for sun, for example, now stands for the spoken sound sun. This is a major advance, but it requires a vast and cumbersome vocabulary of signs, one for every word in the language. A scholar in ancient China or a scribe in ancient Egypt had to memorize thousands of distinct characters. The truly revolutionary breakthrough, the discovery that would democratize writing and unlock its full potential, was the rebus principle. This was the moment that scribes realized a symbol could be used to represent not a meaning, but a pure sound, detached from its original concept. It is the kind of wordplay a child might use, drawing a picture of an eye, a can, a sheep, and a you to represent the sentence, "I can see you." This insight that symbols could be phonetic was the key. This phonetic principle was slowly refined. Systems were developed where a sign represented a whole syllable. But the final, most elegant solution was the alphabet. The idea was to create a small, manageable set of symbols, where each symbol represented one of the basic, elementary sounds of a language, a single phoneme. The ancient Phoenicians, a seafaring people of the Levant, developed one of the first highly successful alphabets. It was later borrowed by the Greeks, who made one crucial addition. They invented symbols for the vowel sounds, which the Phoenician system had lacked. With this small toolkit of just a couple of dozen abstract signs, a person could now write down any word, any thought, any story that could be spoken. This remarkable technology had a profound and transformative effect on the human mind and on human society. In a purely oral culture, knowledge is preserved in ways that make it easy to remember. In epic poems, in rhyming couplets, in proverbs, in stories filled with repetition. With writing, knowledge could be externalized from the mind. It could be stored on a scroll, a tablet, a piece of paper. Libraries could be built, creating a collective, external memory for our species that far surpassed the capacity of any individual. History, no longer a fluid myth, could be recorded with precision. Laws could be codified and made permanent. Science, built upon the slow, steady accumulation of recorded observations, could begin its long and patient climb. Learning to read physically restructures the human brain. It forges new neural pathways, creating a specialized region in the visual cortex known as the visual word form area, which becomes expertly tuned to the task of recognizing letters and words. Writing encourages a different kind of thinking, more linear, more analytical, more abstract. A spoken utterance is a dynamic event, but a written sentence is a static object. It can be examined, reread, analyzed, and questioned in a way that a fleeting spoken word cannot. It freezes our thoughts so that we may look upon them with a critical eye. And most magically of all, Writing is a form of time travel. It allows a single human voice to speak across an ocean of centuries. Through these frozen echoes of thought, we can listen to the arguments of Plato in ancient Athens. We can feel the heartache of a poet in medieval Japan. We can hear the quiet wisdom of a philosopher in ancient Rome. Writing grants a kind of immortality, allowing a consciousness to transcend its own brief existence and whisper its story into the minds of the unborn. A quiet and permanent testament in a world of fleeting, beautiful sound. The invention of writing gave language a body, a way to freeze its fleeting echoes into permanent, visible form. But in doing so, something essential was lost. The technology that allowed a voice to speak across millennia could not capture the living, breathing soul of the spoken word. If you read the simple, written sentence, "I am fine," the words themselves offer no clue to their true meaning. Are they spoken with a bright, cheerful lilt, a heavy, sighing resignation, a sharp, defensive edge, or a flat, hollow emptiness? The words are identical, but the realities they communicate are worlds apart. This is because the vast majority of our meaning, the rich and vibrant emotional truth of our communication, flows not in the words we choose, but in the deep, ancient music that carries them. This is the world of prosody, the melody, rhythm, and tone of our voice. It is the unspoken song that lies just beneath the surface of our speech. Prosody is the reason that a rising intonation at the end of a phrase is universally understood as a question. It is the reason we can detect sarcasm, where the literal meaning of the words is the precise opposite of the intended message. It is the power of emphasis, the way that stressing a single word can pivot the entire meaning of a sentence. Consider the simple phrase, "I want to go home," which is a statement of personal desire. Compare it to, "I want to go home," a plea of deep longing. Or, "I want to go home," a declaration of a specific destination. The words have not changed, but the music has, and in that music, the true story is told. While the thousands of languages on Earth present a dazzling variety of grammars and vocabularies, the prosodic expression of core emotions is remarkably, beautifully universal. The sound of pure joy, for example, is almost always characterized by a higher pitch, a faster tempo, and a wider range of intonation. The voice of sadness, by contrast, is typically slower, lower in pitch, and more monotonous. These are not learned conventions. They are deep, biological realities, the direct acoustic expression of our inner physiological states. This primal, emotional language is likely far more ancient than the structured, grammatical language it accompanies. It is a direct line from one nervous system to another, a message that bypasses the analytical mind and speaks directly to the feeling heart. In fact, our bodies are listening to this music all the time, far below the level of our conscious awareness. According to the polyvagal theory, our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment for cues of safety or danger, and the primary source of this information is the prosody of the human voices around us. When we hear a voice that is calm, melodic, and in a middle frequency range, the very sound of the parenthese that soothes an infant, our nervous system interprets it as a sign of safety. Our heart rate slows, our breathing deepens, and the social engagement centers of our brain light up. We feel relaxed, connected, and open. Conversely, a voice that is loud and aggressive, or one that is flat, robotic, and devoid of emotional color, can be interpreted by our nervous system as a sign of threat. This can trigger an ancient, defensive response of fight or flight, or even a state of shutdown and dissociation. This is happening automatically, a constant, subconscious conversation between our body and the world, a dialogue in which the music of a voice can mean the difference between a feeling of peaceful connection and a primal sense of fear. And this silent conversation extends far beyond the voice. The words we utter are but a single instrument in a vast orchestra of non-verbal communication. Our faces are a canvas of emotion, capable of thousands of subtle expressions that can instantly convey our inner state. A furrowed brow, a crinkled eye, a fleeting, genuine smile. These are signals of immense power and clarity. The way we hold our bodies, our posture, speaks volumes about our confidence or our insecurity. The simple act of a gentle touch can communicate a depth of comfort and empathy that words could never hope to achieve. This rich symphony of unspoken signals is the bedrock of our social reality. It is the invisible current upon which our verbal conversations float. We are always communicating, always sending and receiving these deep, ancient messages of feeling and intention. And so, after our long journey into the magnificent architecture of language, from the first sound to the complexities of grammar, we arrive at this humble and profound truth, that beneath this incredible intellectual achievement lies an older, and perhaps wiser, form of communication. It is the music of the soul, the language of the body, a direct and honest dialogue between beings that reminds us that before we were talking heads, we were feeling animals, connected by an ancient and beautiful symphony of unspoken feeling. We have listened to the unspoken conversation that flows between us, the silent music of connection and feeling that underpins our words. Now, as the world outside grows quiet, we turn our attention inward to the most intimate and persistent conversation of all. It is the conversation we have been having with ourselves for as long as we can remember. It is the quiet, constant, and unheard voice that narrates our lives from within, the voice inside the mind. Take a moment, as you rest here, to simply listen to it. Perhaps it is planning for tomorrow, or replaying a memory from yesterday, or simply making a quiet observation about the comfort of your bed. For most of us, this stream of inner speech is the very texture of consciousness, so constant and so familiar that we barely even notice it. But what is this strange and silent voice? Where does it come from? And what purpose does it serve in the quiet theatre of the mind? This inner monologue is a strange and beautiful paradox. It is a form of language, complete with words and sentences, yet it is produced without a sound, without any movement of the lips or larynx. It has an audience of only one, yet it can feel as real and as compelling as any external conversation. For a long time, philosophers and scientists have wondered about its origins. Is it the source of our self-awareness, or merely its echo? One of the most beautiful and intuitive theories comes from the developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky. He spent countless hours observing young children at play, and he noticed that they have a curious habit. They talk to themselves, out loud. A child building a tower of blocks might narrate their own actions, saying, "Now the green one goes on top. No, it's too wobbly. I'll use the big red one." This is not just idle chatter. This is thought in action. The child is using language as a tool to focus their attention, to plan their next move, and to regulate their own behavior. Vygotsky's great insight was that this external, self-directed speech doesn't simply vanish as we grow up. Instead, it is gradually internalized. As a child becomes more aware of social norms, they learn that it is not always appropriate to talk to themselves out loud. So the voice gets quieter. It becomes a mumbled whisper. And finally, sometime around the age of 7 or 8, it detaches from the vocal apparatus altogether and retreats into the silent space of the mind. It becomes the inner monologue. According to this theory, the voice that you hear inside your head right now is a direct, lifelong continuation of the way you first learned to guide your own thoughts and actions as a child. It is a private, internalized conversation that helps us to navigate the complexities of our lives. And this inner narrator does more than just help us solve problems. It is, in many ways, the primary author of our identity. It is through this inner voice that we construct our sense of self, our autobiographical memory. Our past is not just a jumble of sensory impressions and disconnected events. It is a story. And our inner monologue is the storyteller, the constant narrator that weaves our experiences together into a coherent narrative of me. It is the voice that says, "I am the kind of person who," or "I remember when I felt." It creates a thread of continuity that connects the person you were yesterday with the person you are today and the person you hope to be tomorrow. Without this linguistic storytelling, this constant inner narration, would we even have a stable, enduring sense of who we are? As a final, speculative journey into the nature of this inner voice, we can contemplate the strange and poetic theory of the bicameral mind, proposed by the psychologist Julian Jaynes. He argued that for our ancient ancestors, perhaps as recently as the time of the Trojan War, this inner voice was not experienced as being part of the self at all. He suggested that in moments of crisis or decision, the voice of their own mind was experienced as an auditory hallucination, as the direct, spoken command of a god, a king, or a departed ancestor. Consciousness as we know it, a unified, introspective space with a single, internal narrator, was, in his view, a much more recent cultural invention. While this theory is not widely accepted by scientists, it serves as a powerful thought experiment, a reminder that the way we experience our own consciousness feels natural and inevitable to us, but it may be only one of many ways a mind can be organized. And so, as you lie here in the growing quiet, simply observe this inner voice. It is not the entirety of who you are, but it is a marvelous tool. It is language, the great collective creation of humanity, turned inward to become our most private and constant companion, the gentle, flowing river of thought that accompanies us on our long and singular journey through the world. The inner voice, our constant companion through the waking hours, is the narrator of our logical, linear world. But as the day fades, and our bodies surrender to the gentle gravity of sleep, this narrator begins to falter. The clear stream of our inner monologue grows cloudy, its grammatical structure dissolving into a free-flowing current of images, memories, and disconnected phrases. This is the quiet, porous borderland between wakefulness and sleep, a state of soft confusion where the rigid rules of our conscious mind begin to melt away. We are crossing the threshold, leaving the world of structured language behind and beginning our nightly descent into the strange and beautiful wilderness of the dream. The most vivid and immersive of our dreams unfold during a remarkable stage of sleep, known as REM, which stands for rapid eye movement. Here, behind our closed eyelids, our eyes dart back and forth as if watching a movie. Our bodies, meanwhile, are almost completely paralyzed, a wise and ancient safety mechanism that prevents us from physically acting out the often bizarre narratives that are playing in our minds. And yet, our brain is more active in this state than at almost any other time, consuming vast amounts of oxygen and energy, its electrical signals firing with a furious and creative intensity. This nightly period of intense brain activity is not without purpose. It is a time of profound and essential mental housekeeping. During REM sleep, our brain is busy consolidating the memories of the day, sifting through the vast stream of information we have taken in, discarding the trivial and strengthening the neural connections that encode the important. It is a time of learning and integration, the silent, nocturnal work that allows us to wake up with a clearer and more stable understanding of our world. It is also a form of nightly emotional therapy. The brain appears to reprocess the emotionally charged events of our day, but it does so in a neurochemical environment that is low in stress-inducing hormones. This allows us to strip away the sharp, painful edge from difficult memories, integrating them into our life story without their original emotional sting. It is a process of healing, a quiet, internal alchemy that helps to regulate our emotional well-being. And what of language in this strange and wonderful state? The clear, articulate narrator of our waking mind is rarely in charge here. Language in dreams is often fragmented, surreal, and deeply poetic. We might dream of reading a book whose words rearrange themselves each time we look at them. We might have a conversation with a person from our past who speaks in riddles, or profound, nonsensical pronouncements. The logical, grammatical rules that govern our waking speech seem to be suspended, replaced by a deeper and more mysterious grammar of pure association. One of the most compelling explanations for this is the activation synthesis hypothesis. This theory proposes that during REM sleep, the lower, more primitive part of our brain, the brainstem, sends a barrage of random electrical signals up to the higher, more sophisticated cortex. The cortex, which is our brain's great storyteller and sense-maker, is then faced with the task of weaving these random, nonsensical signals into a coherent narrative. The dream, with all its bizarre plot twists and impossible events, is the brain's best attempt to create a story from chaos. In this context, the strange language of dreams makes perfect sense. It is just another element that the storytelling mind pulls from the random firings of its neurons. The dream speaks primarily in the primal ancient language of images and emotions, a language that long predates the invention of words and syntax. Waking thought is like prose, logical, structured, and analytical. Dream thought is like poetry, metaphorical, associative, and rich with hidden meaning. In a dream, we do not think the words, "I feel trapped and helpless in my current situation." Instead, we find ourselves in a house with no doors, or we try to run away from a formless shadow but our legs are made of lead. The dream speaks in potent symbols, translating our abstract emotional states into vivid, sensory experiences. And so, every night, we undertake this profound transformation. We let go of the sophisticated linguistic self that we have so carefully constructed, and we dissolve back into an older, more primal form of consciousness. We journey into a world woven not from grammar, but from feeling. A silent, internal cinema, where the great, mysterious storyteller of the subconscious takes the stage and plays out the secret dramas of the soul. We emerge from the private, inner cinema of the dream, where the subconscious mind tells its strange and personal stories to an audience of one. Now, as our journey nears its gentle end, we zoom out from the individual dreamer to the great, collective dream of culture and to the most powerful and ancient function of language, the art of the storyteller. Let your mind drift back once more, to a time long before writing, long before cities, to a small band of our ancient ancestors gathered around the flickering warmth of a communal fire. The darkness around them is vast and filled with unseen dangers, but the fire creates a small, safe island of light and community. And in this circle of light, an elder begins to speak. The voice is rhythmic, confident, and captivating. And the story that unfolds is not mere entertainment. It is a vital piece of survival technology, a tool as important as any sharpened stone or animal skin cloak. For in a world without books, the stories told around the fire were the library, the classroom, the courthouse, and the cathedral, all in one. These myths and oral traditions were the vessels that carried a culture's entire universe from one generation to the next. A story about how the mountains were formed or how the stars were placed in the sky provided a people with their cosmology, their sense of place in the vast and mysterious cosmos. A tale about a clever trickster animal who outsmarts a powerful beast was not just a charming fable. It was a lesson in strategy, a piece of wisdom about how the weak and intelligent can triumph over the strong and brutish. A long, chanted genealogy that recited the names of ancestors stretching back for generations was not just a feat of memory. It was a social contract, a map of kinship and obligation that defined the structure of the tribe. Language, in the form of story, was the invisible thread that wove a collection of individuals into a coherent and resilient people. It was the software that ran on the hardware of their minds, programming their beliefs, their morals, and their very identity. This ability to weave a shared reality is built upon a uniquely human cognitive skill known as shared intentionality. It is the ability for us to create, in our minds, a shared goal with others, and to work together to achieve it. But our most profound collaborations are built not around physical objects, but around abstract ideas. And these ideas live only in the stories we tell. A piece of paper with special ink on it is just a piece of paper. But if we tell and believe a shared story about it called money, it becomes a powerful tool that can organize the actions of millions. A group of people is just a group of people. But if we tell and believe a shared story about them called a nation, they become a powerful entity capable of creating laws and defending borders. These imagined communities, as the scholar Benedict Anderson called them, are perhaps the most powerful magic that language has ever conjured. A nation, a corporation, a religion, a system of justice. These are all vast, cooperative projects built upon a foundation of nothing more than a shared belief in a story. Language is the force that allows millions of strangers to trust each other and work together toward a common, imagined goal. It is no wonder, then, that the storyteller has always held a place of reverence and importance in human societies. There may even be an evolutionary advantage to being a good narrator, a phenomenon sometimes called the Scheherazade effect. In our ancestral past, an individual who could captivate an audience, who could remember and skillfully recount the tribe's history and wisdom, who could soothe fears with a comforting myth, or inspire courage with a tale of a hero, would have been an immensely valuable member of the community. Storytelling was a demonstration of intelligence, of memory, of social and emotional understanding. It was a way to build alliances, to gain status, and to strengthen the very bonds of the group. We are the descendants of those who were best at telling and listening to stories. And so we find ourselves today, still living deep inside these webs of narrative. Our lives are guided by the great stories of our cultures, our nations, our families, and by the small, personal stories we tell ourselves. Language is not merely a tool for describing the world as it is. It is the primary tool we use to create the world we inhabit together, the grand, collective dream that gives our fleeting, individual lives a lasting and shared sense of meaning. Our journey has celebrated the immense and wondrous power of language, the great collaborative dream that allows us to build worlds, to bind societies, and to weave the very fabric of our reality. We have followed its story from the first stirrings of connection to the magnificent, complex tapestry it is today. And yet, for our final contemplation, we must make one gentle, final turn. We must explore the limits of this great invention and celebrate the profound, communicative power of its opposite. Our journey, which began in the vast and empty silence of the cosmos, must now return to silence. But this is not the silence of absence. It is a silence that is rich with meaning, a silence that is not the opposite of language, but its most intimate and essential partner. For without silence, language itself would be impossible. Imagine a world where speech was an unbroken, continuous stream of sound, a constant flow of phonemes without break or pause. It would be an incomprehensible wall of noise. It is the tiny, fleeting moments of silence, the microscopic gaps we place between our words and our phrases, that allow our language to have structure and rhythm. A pause is a form of punctuation in the spoken air. A brief silence can signal the end of an idea. A longer silence can build suspense, create dramatic tension, or give a profound and heavy emphasis to the words that follow. Silence is not the void in which language is lost. It is the very canvas upon which it is painted. And yet, there are realms of human experience where even the most beautifully painted words must fail, where language comes to the very edge of its own territory and can go no further. This is the realm of the ineffable. Try, for a moment, to use words to perfectly capture the taste of a fresh, sun-warmed raspberry, or the precise scent of the air after a summer rain, or the overwhelming feeling of peace that can come from watching a quiet sunset. Language can gesture towards these experiences. It can offer us metaphors and approximations. We can say the sunset was beautiful or breathtaking, but these are just labels, faint echoes of the direct, sensory, and emotional reality. The core of the experience itself remains stubbornly, wonderfully beyond the reach of our vocabulary. This is not a failure of language, but a gentle and humble reminder of its purpose. Its net is designed to catch the fish of thought and idea, but it can never hold the entire, flowing ocean of direct experience. This meaningful silence also permeates our social world, often speaking more loudly and more honestly than any words could. Think of the deep and comfortable silence that can exist between two old and trusted friends, sitting together in a room, needing to say nothing at all. This is not an awkward, empty silence. It is a silence full of shared history, mutual understanding, and profound affection. Think of the collective, respectful silence that falls over a crowd during a moment of solemn remembrance, a silence that unites every person in a shared feeling of reverence that transcends individual words. And then think of the heavy, difficult silence of a deep disagreement, where the space between two people is charged with all the things that are not being said. In all these instances, silence is not a lack of communication. It is a powerful and sophisticated form of it, a message sent from one heart to another without the clumsy mediation of language. Perhaps the fundamental reason for this gap lies in the very nature of our tools. Language, for all its beauty, is essentially a digital system. It is composed of discrete, separate, and finite units called words. Our inner world of feeling and sensory experience, however, is profoundly analog. It is a continuous, flowing, holistic, and infinitely nuanced stream. When we use language, we are attempting to describe the flowing, analog river of our experience by scooping it up into a series of separate, digital buckets. The buckets are useful. They allow us to share a portion of the river with someone else. But the collection of buckets can never be the river itself. There will always be something lost in the translation, from the infinite flow of feeling to the finite code of words. And so, our long story of the origin of language comes to rest here, in this quiet and contemplative space. We have seen how our ancestors broke the cosmic silence to find a voice. Now, we can appreciate the deep and nourishing silence from which that voice arises, and to which all of our most profound experiences must eventually return. It is the silence that gives our words their form, the silence that holds what our words cannot, the beautiful, living stillness that is the beginning and the end of every story. We have journeyed together from the deep and silent past, from a universe without a voice to a planet humming with its own elemental song. We have followed the thread of connection from the first simple cells to the first complex symbols, from the dawn of grammar to the quiet, inner narrator in the theatre of our own minds. This has been the story of language, a lullaby from the dawn of time, a tale of how we, a scattered and vulnerable species, learn to weave our minds together with the magic of a shared voice. And now, in our final moments together, we gently turn our gaze from the past to the horizon that lies before us. For this great story is not over. Language is not a perfect, finished monument to be placed in a museum. It is a living, breathing, and wild thing, a river that is constantly carving new channels, and today it is evolving at a speed that is truly unprecedented. This rapid evolution is being driven by the new digital ecosystems in which we now live. The rise of instant messaging and social media has created a laboratory for linguistic innovation. We see the birth of new, shortened vocabularies and grammatical structures designed for speed and brevity. And we are witnessing the emergence of entirely new visual languages. The emoji, in many ways, is a fascinating return to a pictographic form of writing, a set of simple, iconic faces and objects that can convey emotional nuance and tone in a way that plain text often cannot. It is becoming a truly universal language of feeling, a new set of signals in our ever-growing repertoire. A meme, that strange and powerful combination of image and text, is a new form of cultural storytelling, a way of sharing a complex idea or a humorous observation in a single, potent, and instantly recognizable package. At the same time, we are, for the first time in history, beginning to create non-human partners for our great conversation. The field of artificial intelligence known as natural language processing is teaching machines to understand, to interpret, and even to generate human language with increasing fluency. We speak to them in our homes and carry them in our pockets. This development brings with it gentle and profound questions for the future. What does it mean to be understood by a mind that is not biological? What new forms of creativity and connection might emerge from this collaboration between human and artificial thought? The story of language has always been one of finding new ways to bridge the silence between minds, and this may simply be the next, extraordinary chapter. But as these new linguistic forms are being born, we must also acknowledge a poignant and heartbreaking loss. Our planet's rich tapestry of language is fraying. Of the more than 7,000 languages spoken today, it is estimated that nearly half are endangered, at risk of vanishing within the next generation. Some are disappearing at the devastating rate of 1 every 2 weeks. When the last speaker of a language passes away, the world loses far more than a collection of words and grammatical rules. We lose a unique repository of human knowledge, a library of myths, poems, and stories that has been built up over centuries. We lose a distinct worldview, a one-of-a-kind way of seeing and interpreting reality. The preservation of this linguistic diversity is the preservation of the full, glorious, and multifaceted spectrum of the human spirit. And so, our journey concludes where it began, with a sense of quiet wonder. The story of language is the story of the unending human impulse to reach out of our own solitary consciousness and connect with another. It is an echo of the first gesture that meant, look, the first shared symbol that meant us, the first story told around a fire that meant we are not alone. This ancient lullaby, born in the deep silence of our planet's past, is still being sung. It is being remixed and rewritten by every new generation, by every new technology, and by every child who speaks their first word. It is the beautiful, chaotic, and ever-evolving song of humanity, a current that flows from the dawn of time into the quiet mystery of the future, binding us all in its gentle and unending conversation. Thank you for joining me on this long journey tonight. It has been a true privilege to share this story with you. If these words have brought you a measure of peace or a moment of wonder, I would be so grateful if you would share this lullaby with others who might find comfort in it. For now, there is nothing left to do but to rest. May your mind be quiet, and may your dreams be gentle. Please take care, and sleep well.